I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel and to this series called Wildly Loved, and to this little mini series within it called Lessons in Wild Love. Really, it's about how to stop living in these constraints of, how things should be and must be and have to be, because we often get stuck in these rigid patterns of childhood. And to me, if you want to start to live with a greater sense of peace and relaxation, a lot of the work we do in therapy too is challenging what we thought was true and the things we were doing that aren't serving us, and finding self-compassion and developing coping skills and tools. And it's a lot to do. And so I really wanted to talk today about a topic that's been emerging. If you're not on TikTok, you may not have heard about this as much, but this idea that being an empath, separate from being highly sensitive, so just being an empath, is actually really related to the adaptations of complicated childhood attachment patterns. So that we're not so much born this way, but we had to make adaptations to survive our childhood that often result in empathic qualities. Now, I'm not saying being an empath isn't a thing. I really do believe that some people, I think I'm extremely intuitive. It's hard to know, did that come from having to mind and mood read my caregivers? Do I have things where I swear to you it happens a lot, where I won't have seen a patient sometimes for years, and I will just randomly think about them, and then they will literally email me or call me within a day or two. I mean, I don't know what that's about, like energy or not. I don't know. I don't have all the answers to that stuff. But at the core, I think there is something about the combination of our temperament. So are we more sensitive? That I do believe. Some people are just more sensitive to the world and to clothing. And I'm not talking about even about diagnostic, criteria like ASD or other issues. I'm just saying, just first of all, in general, we all have these little nuances, and yet we're also similar in some ways. But so that sets the stage, right? There are these, I believe, genetic differences and predispositions. I'm getting where I'm talking too fast, and so I'm going to slow down. So all that aside, I want to talk about protecting and honoring the empathy and empathic qualities you have, but protecting as well as honoring, okay? So we're going to go through the 10 traits from Judith Orloff's book on the highly, I think it's the Empath's Guide for Highly Sensitive People. I really love this book. There are parts of it, I will just completely honestly say that the beginning I feel like really honors what we feel, a lot of these qualities. And then there are some parts of the book that for many people feel a little too mystical or intuitive or, whatever. And I'm not even going to comment on that, but just to tell you that there are a lot of validating parts of this book. If you feel like, gosh, why am I like this? But if you read this book, and this is true for every pop psychology book especially, these books are meant to sell. They're meant to have a very specific thing so that you believe it and buy into it, and they're kind of rigid sometimes. And so I always tell patients, take the spirit. Take what works, let go of what doesn't. So that being said, really quickly before I go into this though, I am, as I said, a licensed psychologist, and I would love for you to subscribe. And if you want to do so, please check the little box, and that way you'll get notified when I post new videos. And really, in terms of this topic today, I have to say, if you grew up with parents who you believe might be very strongly leaning towards a more borderline presentation or narcissistic, or are often called highly immature, please check out my courses. I am not a great salesperson, but I saw a TikTok today with someone saying, those of us who don't feel good at selling things, if you look at it as you're not selling something, I'm not trying to sell someone's products, I am selling something that I truly believe in my heart that is impactful and helpful. And that's helped me kind of reframe it, because to be honest, I've made the courses and not done a great job except for really here, just mentioning them. But I am going to move into some other workshops and things like that in the summer, I hope. But I truly do believe that it is life-changing to be validated in that way, especially if you were raised by parents who you thought were more narcissistic, and maybe you're thinking, actually, there's a borderline trait there. There's often a mix of the two, especially if it wasn't all bad, if you sometimes got your needs met. That, I think, is the hardest one. And as I will just lastly say, as a child of a borderline parent and to very, very eggshell parents, it took me almost more degrees than I care to admit before I finally understood what happened to me and why, and I don't think we talk about it enough. Okay, sorry for that long intro. Let's get into it. So, according to Judith Orloff's book, the first of the 10 traits of being an empath, the first one is empaths are highly sensitive. They are naturally giving, spiritually open, and good listeners. Now, what I will say is that, as I go back to the videos I've been posting, is that if you had a certain kind of childhood, you needed to be very aware of what was going on. And oftentimes, if you didn't receive the kind of love you wanted, we grow up and we say, well, I'm not ever going to be like that. And we might sometimes fall back into those patterns, but oftentimes we're not. We almost go too far at being loving and giving and good and kind and nice, which is not the same as kind, but we want to be seen as good people because oftentimes we didn't feel inside that our caregiver saw us as good. So we're highly sensitive, and that may also be a more temperamental genetic trait, but at the core, that sensitivity at times might make it difficult for us to honor that we're not too sensitive, that what we feel is worthy and valuable, even if the world tells us that we're being, too much or too sensitive. Number 2, empaths absorb other people's emotions. Yes, that goes back to that mind and mood reading of others. And so you might find that one of your challenges is to, as I said in the beginning of the week, to turn that off. Yes, it's a great thing. It's great for therapists. A lot of us have these childhoods. That's why we're so good at reading that little, as I say, that little muscle in your eye when you're about to cry. But sometimes that's exhausting and depleting. And if we're not working in a session, not a helpful thing to do. And not everything has to mean something. So you want to work on that. Many empaths are introverted. Now that might also go back to a temperament thing, but I also think that if you take it to a situation where maybe because of that experience where your caregiver was highly irritable or volatile or unpredictable, and you learn that if you could be in your room playing alone, you were safer when your parents were arguing or they were going to come in the door and yell at you. You might find also with avoidant attachment that you learn to regulate alone because the parents did not know how to deal or discouraged inadvertently your negative emotions. And so basically you learn to deal with your feelings alone. And so that might be introversion where you feel overwhelmed and overstimulated because also in chaotic childhoods, people are exhausting. There is no space. There is no safety consistently. So that gets kind of a place where you want to look at, is this introversion? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Or no, am I just actually isolating to deal with feelings? And that's okay too, except for if it shuts your partner out or your relationships out in a way that doesn't serve you. Number 4, empaths are highly intuitive. That goes back to everything else I've said, that maybe you are, yes, just you are. But maybe also you've gone back to that situation where you're always having to think about what's coming next or mind and mood reading. And so that is just wearing you out, right? It is so exhausting. And then, as I always say, as I said in this video, you're always making meaning behind it because we need to have a story. The story follows the state of our body. Our nervous system reacts like, am I in danger? But maybe it's just that someone dropped a dish and it was like no big deal. But in your childhood, when you dropped something, you were screamed at. So your nervous system kind of jacks up. And now you have this whole story about why you're upset and what happened or what's wrong. And maybe it was just that you were triggered by the dish, right? And that took you back to childhood, like an emotional flashback. So you want to work on that. Empaths need alone time. That kind of goes back to exactly what I said about introversion versus isolation versus safety. So yeah, for many of us, I love being alone, but I'm an only child and I spent a large part of my childhood alone. And then I had 4 children and I have not been alone, in a general sense for the last 23 years, but at the same time, they're older now. And so I get this alone time, but I can spend an entire week. I've traveled to Europe alone. And that's a good thing. The world says, yeah, you're so independent and rewarded, but sometimes it can be not so good because I can have these avoidant qualities on the flip side of my more anxious qualities. And so you want to look at that too. How is that isolation and alone time? Where is it serving a positive? Like, oh, I need to regroup and I'm an introvert and I feel overstimulated. And where is it kind of going into that other place where it might be sabotaging connection? Next is empaths can become overwhelmed in intimate relationships. Well, that makes sense, right? If you were going back to more anxious attachment or avoidant attachment or disorganized, people are stressful. People might be unsafe or untrustworthy. And so that can be a situation where you struggle to have a separate sense of self, but then, you want to be connected, but then when you do, you get overwhelmed. And so you want to look at how does that show up in your relationships. Number 7, empaths are targets for energy vampires. And this goes back to, let's just say, for example, that you didn't come out of the womb more sensitive than anybody else, but that you had a more chaotic childhood. In your home, there was a lot of fighting or yelling, or the parent was angry a lot, or they were great and then not great. And so your nervous system is just always like this, right? And at the same time, you don't want to be like them. So you go out in the world and you try to be such a good person, but then that results in having a lack of boundaries. Maybe you do need alone time. Maybe you don't want to have lunch every day with your coworkers. It's okay to go sit in your car some days or to just take a walk. You're not obligated to be like that person for everyone, but you try to do that because you don't want to be the caregiver, and now you feel just like everything is just sucked out of you. And that can also set you up, as I've said, for being chosen by more narcissistic type of people who are more takers, because you just want to show up with this like giving, loving posture. I'm getting so excited. I'm talking too fast again. You want to show up with this like, oh, I'm here for you. I care for you. But you maybe sometimes don't have good boundaries, or you mistake that presentation of someone who's confident and who can handle things as security, when really it's narcissism or something else, or it's just plain old selfishness. And then number 8 is empaths become replenished in nature. This one, I don't know. I think everyone becomes replenished in nature. And when we look at the polyvagal theory in therapy, that's the whole idea of your nervous system. One of the exercises is to go and put yourself, when you're feeling, out of tune, into blue and green environments where there's, flowers or trees or ocean or lake or land, that there is something very soothing and calming about that. And so I would say that stressfulness and busyness of life that we're all living on our phones and our computers and the world, there's something about going out into the world where it is just basics, right? It's back to basics. And so you can let yourself be let yourself marvel, I don't know if that's even a word, at the beauty of the world. I go for a walk. I've been trying to walk more. As I've said, I've struggled in the last few years with my autoimmune and getting older. And when I go walk at the beach at night, it fills me in a way, if I can get out the door, that I can't get anywhere else. And so maybe that's just walking down your street, but that's good. So just look at, are you doing things to help nurture and honor that part of you inside that does need peace and beauty and quiet and just awe in the world. Empaths have highly tuned senses, so we're often triggered by noises and smells and sounds or excessive talking, which I kind of am doing right now, I feel like. But I will say that I'm very triggered by, breathing and chewing, and for some reason I have the most horrific sense of smell, and it makes me like almost rage when something smells really bad. And so that might be my own genetics. It might be that in childhood I spent a lot of time alone and in control of my environment. It might be that, I didn't have siblings making noise in the background. Then again, I have 4 kids, and my daughter has this really bad as well, the misophonia. Misophonia is that rage response in the nervous system to people's often mouth sounds. So you want to look at that, right? If you're raging at times at your partner because of these things, yes, you are triggered, but you're still responsible for how you're responding. And so it's great that you developed all this empathy and empathic ability, but hold yourself accountable to how you're handling it. And lastly, empaths have huge hearts, but sometimes give too much. And so that pretty much sums up everything I've already said. We want to look at, we love that about ourselves, that we didn't want to be those caregivers. We wanted to be more stable and consistent, not perfect. We wanted to be different parents, or we are different parents. But at the same time, we do need to look at how we love on ourselves, how we protect ourselves, how we, give ourselves compassion, or or just general basic self-care. And so the important thing to remember is that you had to do all of these to survive. All of these things, regardless of where they came from, there's some beauty about them. There's something really special about who you are. And that needs to be honored, and it also needs to be protected. It doesn't make you a bad person because you don't want to be your caregiver, and then you set boundaries and shut people out when the world is too much. There's nothing wrong with that. And so just honor that you are a beautiful survivor. Lastly, I want to show you this. This is, I think I've had it in other videos, but when I had an office, now that I'm working from home, I had this in my office. I've always had it since day one of therapy. And I truly believe this about people that have any kind of trauma, but especially those who have survived ongoing difficult childhoods. It says, "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen." I'm talking to you. You didn't just happen, and you are a beautiful person. So honor it and protect it. I'll see you Monday. Have a good weekend and stay safe and take good care. Bye, guys.